Hey Jeff, do you want to go on a journey?
I can't wait.
Well, today's journey is a bit different. We're going to go through the last 20 episodes of So Much Crime, So Little Time and discuss the highs,
The lows, the middles, the sort of highs, the sort of lows, all the things in between. Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee, and today this is a special episode.
So far, we've covered 10 podcasts over the last 20 episodes.
Our mission is to find the true crime stories that are worth your time.
So how are we doing? Let's look back at all the crimes, all the times.
Let's jump into it. So, Jeff, let's start off. I'd love to know, what's a standout podcast that we've reviewed? What's like the one that your mind keeps coming back to?
You mean other than the one that we do?
Of course. Not
That's
So
probably
Much Crime, So Little Time. Anything else?
Anything else? Yeah, I mean, there's several, which is weird because when we started doing this, you know, I had mixed feelings about true crime in general, but I mean, the thing about Pam is probably the one that it's weird to say it was the most fun because it's fun's not the right word, but that was maybe the most entertaining. What about you?
Yeah, it's down as I think the one. I feel like maybe in 2-3 months I'm going to be like, that's what I need to listen to. I want to re-listen to it. Do you think that's because of like the production or the story? Because obviously it was produced by Dateline. They're like really polished. Of course, Keith Morrison's there, who is the host that we love. But is it the format that you liked? Like, have you listened to any other Dateline podcasts since then?
I haven't. I do follow them on Instagram, and there's a lot of fun Keith Morrison content on there. So, but no, I mean, honestly, I feel like, have I listened to any other Dateline podcasts? Have I listened to any podcasts that we don't talk about on this show? Because it takes me so much time to listen to the podcasts that we talk about on this show. Yeah, no, I think I haven't. Have you?
I really thought you were going to launch into a spiel there. And then it was like, oh, I don't know. I haven't. I haven't yet, but it makes me think if both of us are like, wow, you know, as you said, like it was a hard word, insert word here, entertaining one to review because there was so many elements that were just wild and wacky. And Pam as a character in general was wild and wacky. But you know, I wonder, should we? Oh,
go ahead.
I wonder, should we put down another Dateline podcast on within our next 20 to try and do like a little bit of a compare and contrast?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I was going to add to that. I think when we're thinking about like some of the top shows that we've talked about, I think, you know, Black Girl Gone was recent. That's one that I feel like in terms of the ones that I feel like I go and I talk to people about, like I tell them about, like, this is a show that I think either is, you know, really fascinating or I think I got a lot of like value out of. I thought was really well made. Like Black Girl Gone is at the top of that list. The Retrievals also is there. Like I feel like The Retrievals is one where like if that host puts out another show, I'm interested. Like I would check that out just because I thought that was really well put together.
Yeah, I totally agree. Black Girl Gone is one of the podcasts that I kind of keep going back to in my mind. Like it haunts me in a way that I suppose the thing about Pam doesn't. Like Black Girl Gone, we said it so many times. Amara's so good. The host is so good. And she just does such an excellent job at getting the victim story out there and their names out there. What I really like as well is that she doesn't inflate the ego of the perpetrator, whichever perpetrator or whichever person in the story they think is to blame or is to blame for things that happened. You know, it's the victims that are first, which I loved, which was a bugbear of mine for a couple of our podcasts that we did.
Wait, was it what of yours? What was that word? Say it again.
No, because I'm like, maybe I said it wrong.
What was the word?
I'm gonna Google it before I say it. Yeah, a bugbear of mine.
So how do you spell that?
Sorry. Bugbear.
Bugbear.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
A particular thing that annoys or upsets you. I've just looked it up in the Cambridge English Dictionary just to make sure that I didn't make it up.
I may just be ignorant of the term. That is entirely possible. It may not be like an Irish thing. It may just be my own ignorance. A bugbear. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, what was a bugbear? Not what the definition is. What was the bugbear for you?
A bugbear of mine is now it feels like, do you know when you say a word too many times and it loses its meaning? Sorry.
It's a weird word.
Yeah, but because I just looked it up and it was in so many places, now when I'm saying it, I feel like I'm saying it awkwardly. One of the bugbears of mine is when the podcast, inflate the ego of the person who is the perpetrator of the story. I'm sure there's a few that you can remember that it annoyed me about.
Yeah, I think that's true. I agree with that. I think in a way, I think that's one of the criticisms of the thing about Pam, right? Like, I mean, she's right there in the title. It's a little bit cartoonish in its presentation, right? Like, it's almost like too flippant in a way. Like, as much as I enjoyed that one, whereas, yeah, I agree. Black Girl Gone is so centered on making the victims into real people, which is I think important, and I don't know. I appreciate that. You know what I was going to say too. One of the ones that we talked about was the Fox News true crime podcast, the one about the Karen Stitt murder, which I think we talked about this at the time. Like, I had some mixed feelings about it as like some of the Fox News angles of it, but I thought, like, I didn't walk away from that one really thinking anything about the perpetrator in that one. Like, even as though that one was an interview with the cop, the cold case detective, and he was obviously the center of the story, I still feel like the thing that haunted me the most about that was the story of Karen Stitt, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like the lasting effect on like her boyfriend and like the people around her, more than sort of like, in a way, giving space to the criminal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder, is that a lot to do with names? Like, I feel like that's been like a common thread throughout the podcasts that I've enjoyed, is like the very deliberate use or not use, omission.
Omission, yeah.
The very deliberate omission of certain people's names. So like Black Girl Gone, I feel like you hear so few times you hear about like the perpetrators' names, but you hear the victims' names quite often. It was the same thing in the Retrievals. I feel like it was very similar within the Karen Stitt case as well. Like, you didn't hear the perpetrator's name. And so I feel like that did a really good job at like pushing things to the fore that are most important, which is like the names of the victims and the people, like them as people.
Yeah, which is in like, I think, really sharp contrast with something like West Cork, where Ian Bailey was like the center of that story, or the Tylenol murders, where, we don't technically know who the perpetrator of the crime was, but it seemed like they gave a lot of space to the guy who maybe was the one. And, I think that that was just such a different angle and such a different approach.
Yeah. Yeah, like there was, for the Tylenol murders, like there was a lot of victims in that case. And I know the first episode was basically about one family. A huge portion of it was about one particular family. And I find it hard to even recall the name.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I was going to bring up was in terms of which was maybe the show that had the biggest sort of letdown or surprise from the preview to the recap. And I feel like Tylenol Murders for me was one that was, in a way, a letdown. I think West Cork maybe say the same thing, where the first episode was just so markedly different from everything that came after. But in Tylenol Murders, you're right. Like, that first episode was all about those victims, those families, the the little girl who died, and then it really, all those people sort of just disappeared from the story
Yeah.
for the rest of the series, it seems. Which, and the same thing with West Cork, where like it eventually came back to Sophie, but that was pretty late. Like, right? Like we didn't get her son coming in until like maybe the
13
last or second
episodes
last.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I think, is that was I feel like in terms of like where we go from our preview to our recap, those ones were unexpected to me.
Yeah, it's funny enough, I actually have the same two written down as like the biggest letdowns. West Cork, exactly for the same reason, and Tylenol. I remember listening to the Tylenol Murders and being hooked on the first episode. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was so well done, and it just fell off for me. And then like a Filthy Rituals, like it just felt like I had said it at the time, I wouldn't listen to it. I wouldn't have listened to it if it wasn't for this podcast after episode 1, but there were a couple of episodes in it that I just was obsessed with. Which is maybe my common like thread. I think it is my common thread through all these podcasts, is when there's like a group of older people coming together to discuss and to help out with crime. Like it's usually when I'm like, oh my God, I love these guys. I want to like have a cup of tea and chat to them.
You love your Hampstead Justice League. I think that,
I know.
like in terms of the references that I feel like have come up the most post discussion, I think Hampstead Justice League is probably near the top of that list.
I know. And as we're talking about them, I do need to apologize to them because obviously they're listening, because I keep referring to them as the Hampstead Justice Club, and they're not a club. They're a league. They're in a league of their own. They like helped so much with that investigation. So apologies.
You have been slighting them for a long time, and I know we've tried to clean some of that up in post production, but
don't you dare sully my name to the Hampstead Justice League. So let's talk about the hosts for a second. I often like starting out our preview chats on the hosts. Who's the host do you think we'd have the most fun having a pint with?
I mean, other than Keith Morrison, or are we?
Do you think Keith Morrison would be fun to have a pint with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think
you don't
so?
think so? Why don't you think so?
No, it's not that I don't. I'm just curious. I wasn't sure. Maybe a whiskey. I don't think he's a pint man.
Okay, either one. I'm good either way.
Let me think. Who else? I feel like I've said that I definitely want to go for a pint with Matt Hutchison. Or maybe I just want to go to the library to see Matt Hutchison.
Can you have a pint at the library with Matt Hutchison?
I don't think that that's acceptable.
I think that's frowned upon.
I don't think you're allowed to bring in drinks to the library because you might spill them on the books or the computers.
Yeah. Dee, what about just, so aside from the host you'd like to have a pint with, what about just the one that you feel like just did the best job in terms of their hosting duties? Like, what do you want in a good host?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of difficult because there's elements of, say, Amara from who's the host of Black Girl Gone, which I just adore because she's very factual. Like, there's no opinion. It's just a lot of facts, and like it's very victim first. So I loved that. I really enjoyed like her voice, and I liked hearing her speak. As I said before, I couldn't binge that show. It is quite a lot. Obviously. So let me think. Like, who were the hosts that like Keith Morrison really like entertained? I found like the little sarcasm, the little quips in his voice really good. There's definitely a pairing that I found worked really well. I liked the hosts of West Cork.
Yeah, they were good.
Like, I liked their dynamic. I feel like you heard a little bit of them coming through, like a bit of their personalities kind of coming through.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also, the one we haven't really talked much about is the Crossbow Killer, Meg Perry and Tim Hinman. That was an unusual dynamic.
That's who I want to go for a pint with. I'd say they'd be great crack. The Welsh would be great crack for a pint.
Just because they're Welsh, or more than that?
I don't know. He came across real sound.
Yeah. I mean, I liked that they did something different with the hosting job there, right? Like, you had Tim Hinman, who is listed as the narrator, and then
Yeah.
Meg Perry, who was listed as, I think, the producer and presenter, but really they were effectively co-hosts, right? Like they didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think did they ever interact in the show, or are they
No.
just? It was usually like either one
No,
talking or
but
the other talking separately.
remember the girl was there for the first part of like the kind of the first couple of episodes? I can't remember her name.
Ellen Wynn, the BBC reporter.
So we've discussed how like the thing about Pam is the one that like you kind of keep coming back to. I've said I would definitely re-listen to it. Is that the one that you think like you're not as into true crime as me? So I said 2 or 3 months time. I'm going to give you a year or two. Is that the podcast from the first 10 that you would be like, I want to re-listen to that?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe, but honestly, and maybe this is a little bit of recency bias, but I think the one that I would most want to re-listen to is The Crossbow Killer. Not so much because of the story, but more just because like I thought the production values were so high. Like I love the poems, I love the music. I think the sound effects were a little much, like a lot of ocean sounds, but
A lot
I
of
think
seagulls.
a lot of seagulls. But I think in general, like one that I just, for the elements of just being, I think really like I think I said this in that episode, but like that like guitar riff that's in that show like got stuck in my head. Like it was just catchy. And I thought it complemented well like the mood of the show. And the same thing with the poems. Like there were also poems in Pong Su. We didn't talk about that in that episode, but those weren't poems written for the show. Those were, and it was in the credits, but it would be like, some they were always different writers. Sometimes they were poems like I think there was like a Mary Oliver one. Sometimes they were like excerpts from
Was
books,
there a
but little like
Shakespeare
quotes. Maybe, yeah. But they were just like little bits that I thought added some I don't know. I like that when I open a novel and there's like an epigraph or something at the beginning that's like a couple of lines from a poem like that. I don't know. It's a nice artistic
the English
flourish.
major in you.
Yes.
Didn't you do you did some sort of degree in poetry? Did you not say that before?
Yeah. Well, you've said it more than I've said it. I don't think I've actually brought it up. You've
Maybe
brought it up,
you've
I think,
said it
about
to me off mic. You've been like, yeah, I do English majors.
I think in
That's the
20
line I'm going
episodes, you've brought it up maybe 22 times.
How many times have I brought up? Is it every episode that I bring up how I'm so much younger than you?
Well, now you've done it in this one, so there we go.
I know. I feel like I need to tick the box. It's on my notes every time. It's like, just remind Jeff that you weren't born when this happened.
Is there like a bingo card that you have that I can't see? That's just like, make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Bing,
What
bing,
else is
bing.
on that bingo card?
You'll never find out.
Okay.
Okay, so another question I wanted to ask you, which I find really hard to answer, is like, what's the worst policing that we've seen?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk about a lot of them. The two that first came to mind here were Pam, because like, how was it not Pam from the start? Like the last person to see her, the insurance deal where she signs away her insurance to Pam, just her overall shadiness, the fact that she wasn't, suspect number one. And I get that it's often the husband or the boyfriend, like sure, but that was one. And then the other one that, I mean, Wes Cork, I think, I don't know, I could go either way on this because I feel like there was a lot of criticism of the way the police handled like the scene of the crime and like their slowness to respond. But some of that was because there just hadn't been a murder there, right? Like,
And it was in a rural area, like.
Yeah, a rural area where there hadn't been a crime like that. So maybe they're just like, I get that the people who were first on the scene weren't experienced. What about you?
Oof, real hard to choose. Definitely, I think, look, Pam, what were they at? Like, they knew. They were giving her like help throughout, which was really disturbing. Like in a lot of cases, like I feel like with West Cork, they were trying for the most part. It was just like they were inexperienced, or it was the middle of nowhere, and it was coming up to Christmas, and there was just they had no idea what to do. Whereas the thing about Pam, they were literally like helping her, which was disgusting. But then you think of Filthy Rituals. I have this constant image in my head when I think of Filthy Rituals, which is like one police officer like going to hide in the wardrobe, but she's allergic to cats and she's got all her like bomb gear on. I think it's
Yeah,
bomb
like
gear or like whatever.
combat gear or whatever. Like,
Combat gear. And she's like, the idea of her like trudging to and then hiding in the like wardrobe or closet or whatever, and then she's allergic to cats, so she's sneezing. I'm just like, oh my god, it was comical. And then like like even during the trial, the police asking like the Hampstead Justice League to run out and like grab things from the file because they'd know where it was. Like there was just so much of that I was just like, here.
You know what? One we haven't really talked about much is the Una Linsky story from Inside the Crime.
Yeah.
That was some pretty rough police work there. And that was another one I'd also mention in terms of the one that was maybe biggest surprise from the preview to the recap, because in that first episode, we basically get the story of Una Linsky, and then we take a hard pivot to, this like wrongfully accused story, which is really the rest of the series. Right, like it shifts away from being about Una, and it's more about, how the police really screwed up, and that would be on my list.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it was so unexpected for us to like stop hearing about Una Linsky in that one. Like I found that podcast really intriguing and how it dealt with the subject matter at hand, which is like basically focusing on Martin and his two friends who were convicted, and it turned out to be wrongly convicted. So I did find that like very interesting, like that turn. But I would say to lose the victim in it, because as we said at the time, it was called Inside the Crime, the Una Linsky murder, and it just didn't feel like the Una Linsky murder. It was about another victim in the story who was someone who was wrongly accused and wrongly convicted. So it's probably more the title I had an issue with there than.
Inside the Crime was also one that when I was thinking about, like, after listening to these 10 different shows, 10 different podcasts, and thinking about like how the police work was different in some of that was just because of the times, right? Like Una Linsky happened in the early 70s. Crossbow Killer was much more recent. Crossbow Killer was just such an outlier in terms of like the police kind of had their work done for them by the telematic data from the car. Like if that data existed in the 70s, in a lot of these cases, right? Like Una Linsky's murderer would be in prison right now, right? Like that would have been solved immediately.
Well, only if they were driving a new car.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying, like, if that
car was burnt out and they were managed to find the black box, like, it wasn't just the telematics, like, it was the telematics plus, like, being a feckin' idiot.
That's true. But also, I mean, there was the CCTV. There was the CCTV. That's a hard thing for me to say. There was the CCTV footage, right? That popped up in a few different ones we listened to, but wasn't really a thing in the Una Linsky time. So, you're just going on witness accounts and, some remarkable people remembering the time of day that things happened remarkably well. But still, like there wasn't any real evidence to work with there. If anyone out there listening has suggestions for stories they'd like to see us cover, email us.
So much crime, so little time at gmail.com.
You can also follow us on Instagram and leave us a comment. Let us know what we're doing well, what we could do better, and if you know of any stories that you think we should cover.
Also, send us in an email. Give us your thoughts on any of the podcasts we've covered so far, any lingering questions that you have that we could delve into. We've started to get more and more emails coming through, and we're really excited. We're happy that we're going to be able to discuss them all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next time, we're taking a quick break from True Crime Podcasts.
We'll be discussing a novel in a bonus recap episode. It's Rebecca Mackay's 2023 novel, I Have Some Questions for You.
Why are we talking about this book?
Well, it's the story of a true crime podcaster teaching a group of students about podcasting, but then a crime from the podcaster's past comes back to haunt her. It's basically a modern day version of Murder, She Wrote.
And it's also kind of our story, but a little bit different. And also it's a book.
That's up next on So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of MimeGov Media. The executive producer is Paxton Calariso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show in your podcast app. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.